Okay, here comes the hard part. Now you gotta try to line these bolts here and these holes with these holes on this side. There's a right and a wrong way to put these things on. This is the left side, so this one is reverse thread. So left tightens the right. This one goes on the right side because the right tightens. If you flip these two back, if you get them backwards, you'll have problems with your crank getting loose over time, and you constantly have to go back and tightening them up. Just remember, this one's regular threaded, so it's righty-tighty. This one is reverse thread, so it's lefty-tighty. Just make sure you don't get them backwards. So you go ahead and just press this on this side here. You see how it pushes that bolt, those bolts. Go ahead and try to line up the hole and press this in just a little bit. Don't press it all the way in. Just press it in a little bit so that way you can kind of move it into position and thread the bolts. Just press it in far enough where you can thread the bolts in. That way you know your holes are lined up. Okay, so now I know that these are threaded in here. I'm gonna go ahead and press this in. Now the reason why I hammered and pressed this in instead of just bolting it down, because at this point I'm just going to turn the bolts and it's going to sandwich it. It's going to pull it in. The reason why I didn't do that as first, the bolt was just barely threaded on there and I didn't want to strip it out. So I wanted to get just a little bit more thread into this piece before I start bolting this down. Don't forget your crank has an orientation too. The side with this notch needs to go on the right side because that's where your sprocket's going to attach to. So going like that. And then this piece goes on the left. I don't want to turn over because the bearing will fall out, but you can tell because this is where you'll stick your wrench at. These cranks also have a left and right. This one's stamped with the right. Of course, it would help if I put the dang sprocket on. Whoops. Putting these things on, they're extremely brittle. This one kind of broke off, which sucks. Okay, so I'm kind of bummed out. This chain guard wouldn't have fit because the sprocket's pulled out a little bit. It fits down here, and it fits in here because this is a 36 tooth sprocket, but like I said, the bracket would have been back here and it wouldn't be able to reach. I have to leave the chain guard off. Yeah, there's a much larger gap here, and I wouldn't have worked with this tab up here. I probably could have bent this, but I can live with this. Alright, now that the wide crank is on, I'm kind of worried. These pedals, these were the original on this trike. They don't fit. But what concerns me is how close it is to that wheel. Almost hits that fender too. Well, I'll be taking the fender off, but I'm just a little worried of how close that is to the wheel. Now this wide crank definitely gets your feet out of the way of the engine. I definitely have enough room here. Oh, by the way, this is the old crank here. Kind of glad I took it off. There's hardly any grease on these bearings. Yeah, there's definitely enough room here. So I just got my twist throttle in the mail and it's missing a bolt. I still have this one, but I'm missing this guy. Well, that didn't really work out. Well, I know it's in between those two lines. Alright, the wide crank is on, and I got the controls on too. And it fit perfectly in here. I was kind of afraid it was going to mess with this gear selector. So all I got to do is route the throttle through here. I'm going to have to snake it around this gas tank because the cable has to come this way. It can't come this way, so I have to figure something out. And you got your kill switch. Black goes to black. Green just goes anywhere on the ground on the engine. So that I could do all that off camera. I might end up making my own. Now this crank arm is scrap. This was a project I had a long time ago. I'm just using this as a reference though, but if I use this instead, it will clear the engine because the distance here is pretty wide, and then you got this crank arm which makes it even more wide. That's why I couldn't get the chain guard on, because this sprocket's way out. So I'm curious how that's going to affect the gears back there with that derailleur. But if I use just a regular crank arm, I can clear the engine easily. This side I'm a little worried. Yes, it will clear the chain guard, but I'm going to have the jack shaft right here. I have this clutch on backwards, so that way it can pull the chain in further, because if I had it on normal, the chain will come out this way, right there. But since I have it close to the engine, I have it on backwards, it'll come out closer to the frame. Sprocket will be somewhere right here. This wide crank would clear it really easy. The regular crank might not, or at least it'll be really close to that sprocket and a little too close for comfort. I don't know, I might end up making my own. I have the right crank somewhere in there too, so I can do it to the other side. I kind of went a little fast here on the edges. That's because I didn't want to warp this this tube here. Thankfully it didn't warp. I didn't want to put too much heat on this piece, so I went fast on the edges. These welds came out real fine, which is ironic because these were the harder ones to get to, but they came out really well. This is one solid unit now. So how this jack shaft is going to work, this is your tensioning mechanism here. I just welded these bearing washers onto some threaded rod, and then I went ahead and grinded off some of the threads so it looks a lot better. You don't want to weld on threads because there's a little gap here and that can really mess things up. So I went ahead and grinded it down a little bit. If you loosen this, and then you can move this back, or if you loosen this one up, you can push this forward, and if you like where it's at, you just lock it in place. Obviously both sides are going to have the nuts on. I just only have these two right now, just for temporary use. So the sprocket I'm going to use on the jack shaft, it's a 35 tooth, 36, well, my bad. It's 36 tooth, 35 chain, and it's an aluminum sprocket. And it's really light. But I'm kind of worried because even though this is a 36 tooth sprocket, this is a 32 tooth sprocket, but it's a heck of a lot bigger. That's because this is 40 chain. So I'm running into the same dilemma I had on my mini chopper. I'm using different chain sizes. Now, I don't want to use chain sizes, but I have a 40 chain sprocket and the engine came with a 35 chain clutch. So I'm kind of stuck using two different chain sizes. I think I'm going to use this drive sprocket for the drive axle. Instead, I might end up using this. Now this sprocket is off of a bicycle. It was for the crank, but I'm surprised that the pitch is the same. So this can also take 40 chain. I know this sprocket was meant for leg power, but I know this can hold up, especially because this is a 98cc engine. It's not that powerful. It's a 3 horsepower. So this sprocket could hold up. It'll be fine. With this sprocket though, I'll have a reduction ratio of 13 something because this is a 44 tooth. That will give me plenty enough torque to get this thing going on its own. Now the reason why I want torque is because I got a basket and you know, you're gonna put stuff back there. So I really want torque. I don't really care for speed. I don't care if this thing goes fast. I just care for it to haul stuff. Now I have other sprockets over there. That one is stupid large. I mean, that thing is meant for pulling tree stumps and stuff, so I'm not going to end up using that. That's for a different project. That one's kind of a whole, well, I'll show you. This one here is kind of weird. It's on this whole assembly here. I'm not going to use this one either. I got no choice but to use this. So I have it tacked on right now. That was kind of hard to hold it there, trying to eyeball it, getting it straight with that clutch up there. I have it tacked right now. I think I'm going to call it right now. The next thing I have to do, and I'm still waiting on it, I found a spacer that's 15 millimeters in the ID. It will fit this right here. And I just noticed my drum brake just moved. That's funny. I don't really have a whole lot of space here. I can move this drum brake back. I don't know why it moved. When I get those 15 millimeter spacers, I gotta figure out how to mount that sprocket to the spacer and then figure out the distance in here and then try to get that sprocket lined up to that jack shaft up here. And then I gotta have a tensioner here. So I got my tensioner, and this is the one I'm gonna use. I'm not gonna use the bolts. I'm just gonna weld this piece onto this rail here. Let me get a better view. So I'm going to weld it onto this piece here, and then you can see how the chain will wrap around. It'll come through this sprocket down in here and then back to that sprocket there. I can't do that until I get that sprocket made and attached to that drive axle. That way I can align this up perfectly. I'll figure something out. But in the meantime, I'll see y'all later.